There's a prison in Mexico they call the Alcatraz of the desert. No one escapes it. 24-hour surveillance. Steel doors sealed by the military. Guards handpicked for loyalty. And deep beneath it, solid rock. That's what they thought anyway. Until July 11th, 2015. On that night, in a cell watched around the clock, one of the world's most dangerous men stepped into the shower and vanished. By the time guards opened the door, he was gone, like smoke through concrete. But he didn't just disappear. He escaped through a tunnel that ran nearly a mile long beneath the prison, with electric lights, ventilation, and a custom-built motorcycle mounted on rails. A tunnel that took over a year to dig, a tunnel that cost millions, a tunnel that ended in a half-finished house in a cornfield. This wasn't luck. This was a message. A message that no wall was high enough, no prison deep enough, no government strong enough to hold him. That man's name was Joaquín Guzmán. They called him El Chapo, Shorty. But there was nothing small about him. He was the head of the most powerful drug empire on earth. A man who made billions from death, who ruled with charm, cruelty, and cocaine. To the government, he was a narco-terrorist. To his enemies, a ghost. To some in Sinaloa, he was a hero. But before he became a myth, he was a boy. Poor, barefoot, shoveling poppy seeds into dry earth under a burning Mexican sun. He didn't come from a cartel. He came from nothing. This is the story of how that boy became the most wanted man on the planet. Of how he built a criminal empire across continents. Of how he broke out of not one, but 2 maximum security prisons. And of how, after a lifetime of evading justice, the world finally caught up with him. This is not just a story about drugs. It's a story about power, about betrayal, and about what happens when the man they said was untouchable runs out of tunnels. Before the tunnels, before the billions, before the name El Chapo echoed through courtrooms and corridors of power, there was just a boy, and a village that barely had a name. Joaquín Archibaldo Guzmán Loera was born on April 4, 1957, in the rugged hills of La Tuna, a remote town buried deep in the Sierra Madre Mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico. No roads, no phones, no mercy. The land was dry, the soil stubborn. But it was good for one thing: growing poppies. Joaquín's father was a rancher and a part-time opium farmer. He drank hard, beat harder, and wasted what little money they had. By the time Joaquín was 7, he had stopped waiting for kindness. By 10, he had stopped going to school. And by 12, he was working in the fields, tending to the only crop that paid, the red, sticky flower that oozed life into the drug trade. No toys, no future. Just the soft hiss of poppy pods sliced open by his blade and the weight of a silence that only poverty understands. He was small, but he worked harder than anyone. And even then, he was watching how the drug harvest left in secret, watching who carried the cash, watching who lived and who disappeared. He started running errands for local smugglers, simple things, carrying messages, hauling sacks. He was fast, quiet, invisible. The kind of boy no one noticed until he made himself impossible to ignore. By his teens, Guzmán had earned a reputation. If he said he'd do something, it got done. If someone owed him, they paid. And if they didn't, they disappeared. He didn't want to be rich. Not yet. He just wanted to matter, to never be poor again. And in the mountains of Sinaloa, there was only one way to do that. The drug trade wasn't a crime here. It was a career. Cocaine was booming. Colombian cartels needed northern routes. And Mexico, dry, rugged, lawless Mexico, was the perfect bridge to America. Guzmán wasn't educated, but he understood logistics. Trails, horses, hidden routes through canyons. He started moving larger shipments. First marijuana, then cocaine. And he didn't just move it. He moved it faster, cleaner, safer. He didn't want to be a middleman. He wanted to be the one giving orders. And soon, he would be. But to rise in the drug world, you don't ask for permission. You take it. And the man who controlled the routes then was about to notice the hungry kid from La Tuna. In the 1980s, Mexico's drug routes weren't ruled by dozens of cartels. They were ruled by one: the Guadalajara Cartel, a syndicate so powerful it moved cocaine by the ton and paid off police, politicians, and even generals. Its leader, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, was known as El Padrino, the Godfather. He ran the trade like a businessman, efficient, ruthless, organized. And Guzmán? He was a nobody until he wasn't. At just 25, Joaquín caught the attention of the cartel, not because he was flashy, because he delivered. Faster, cheaper, without excuses. They gave him a corridor, a key smuggling route through Sinaloa into the US. And he turned it into a gold mine. He didn't just move drugs. He innovated how they moved. While others paid off border agents, Chapo built tunnels. While others used couriers, Chapo used planes. And when that wasn't fast enough, he used submarines. He understood that in the drug world, speed is survival, and control is everything. But power inside the Guadalajara cartel wasn't shared forever. In 1985, one event changed everything. A DEA agent named Enrique Kiki Camarena was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by cartel leaders. It lit a fire under the US government. Pressure came crashing down. Arrests, raids, extraditions, and the empire began to crack. Félix Gallardo was arrested in 1989, but before he went down, he did something that would shape the next decade of bloodshed. He divided Mexico into territories, handing control to trusted lieutenants. Guzmán got Sinaloa, others took Tijuana, Juarez, the Gulf. On paper, it was a peace deal. In reality, it was a declaration of war. Now, with his own territory and roots, Chapo didn't just inherit a corner of the business. He inherited a battlefield. And he was ready to fight for every inch of it. With money flooding in, he built an army, gave jobs to hundreds, drivers, killers, builders, pilots, paid police to look away, paid politicians to smile and shake his hand. To many in Sinaloa, he was a patron, a provider. He paved roads, gave food, paid for funerals. To the world, he was just beginning to appear on the radar. But in the underworld, he was no longer Joaquín. He was El Chapo, and he was building an empire of his own. By the early 1990s, El Chapo's Sinaloa Cartel was thriving, but so were his rivals. The peace that Félix Gallardo brokered with his territory map? It didn't last long. Cartels don't share, they conquer. And El Chapo wasn't just a trafficker now. He was a threat. The first to clash with him were the Arellano Felix brothers, who controlled Tijuana. They had the border. He wanted it. The war began with ambushes, then escalated to daylight shootouts. In 1993, Chapo's men tried to assassinate the brothers at the Guadalajara airport. They missed, but they hit someone else. Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, a Catholic leader. It was a mistake that made international headlines, and it brought fire from the Mexican government. Chapo went into hiding. The Arellano Felix brothers called for his head, and the drug war began to eat the country alive. But the Tijuana cartel wasn't Chapo's only enemy. In the north, the Juarez cartel ran a brutal trade route, and in the east, the Gulf cartel was arming its own private military force, Los Zetas, former special forces turned executioners. The violence wasn't just personal anymore. It was national. Towns became battlegrounds. Bodies were hung from bridges. Messages were left carved into flesh. It was a shadow war, fought with dollars and blood. But Chapo wasn't just fighting with guns. He fought with strategy. He used bribes like bullets. He flipped rivals, bought police, and turned politicians into puppets. And when he couldn't buy peace, he buried the problem. Despite being a fugitive, Chapo's power only grew. His product was pure, his network faster, and his reach almost mythic. In villages, people whispered stories of a man who helped the poor, who punished kidnappers, who paid for medicine and meals. In cities, they whispered something else, that El Chapo had become untouchable. But even kings have limits. And in 1993, in the heat of a cartel war and public outrage, his past finally caught up with him. he was captured in Guatemala. And just like that, the most wanted man in Mexico was behind bars. But his story wasn't over. It was only entering its next chapter. Because El Chapo didn't plan to stay in prison. He planned to escape it. In 1993, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán was caught in Guatemala, betrayed by his own bodyguard. He was flown back to Mexico in chains, but even then, he wasn't afraid. He didn't fight the arrest, he smiled for the cameras. Because he knew something most prisoners don't. He wasn't going to stay locked up. They sent him to Puente Grande, a maximum security prison near Guadalajara. But maximum security doesn't mean much when you can buy everyone inside. Over the next 8 years, Chapo lived like royalty. He had a private suite. Visitors came and went. He hosted parties. A different woman slept in his bed nearly every night. He paid off guards, wardens, and directors. Over 70 people were eventually linked to his payroll. While behind bars, he ran the Sinaloa Cartel like a CEO. Orders went in, drugs went out, trafficking routes expanded. Violence continued. The prison walls didn't block his power. They protected it. But Chapo didn't like sitting still. He wasn't made for confinement, even in comfort. And in early 2001, he decided it was time to go. On a quiet day in January, he climbed into a laundry cart, covered himself with dirty bed sheets, and was rolled out the front gate by a paid-off guard. No gunfire, no alarms, just wheels on concrete and a prison full of silence. By the time anyone noticed he was gone, he was already vanishing into the mountains. The escape embarrassed the Mexican government. It outraged the DEA. It inspired songs in Sinaloa. El Chapo had walked through fire, they said, and didn't get burned. But he didn't just escape prison, he escaped legend. Overnight, he became a ghost. And in the years that followed, the ghost would become a king. Because now he was free, with money, power, and revenge on his mind. And no one, not the government, not his enemies, could predict what he would build next. After his escape in 2001, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán didn't run from power. He ran toward it. While most fugitives go underground to survive, El Chapo used his freedom to expand. He rebuilt the Sinaloa Cartel into a global machine. And he did it from mountaintop hideouts, armed convoys, and a network of safehouses so vast that not even the military could keep up. He had lookouts, known as halcones, on every road. Scouts with radios lined the mountains. Loyalists and the police kept him 2 steps ahead. And in the middle of it all, El Chapo lived like a ghost, everywhere and nowhere at once. He moved shipments by air, by sea, by tunnel, by truck, built underground labs in jungles, smuggled cocaine, heroin, meth, marijuana, all with military-level precision. He wasn't just a drug lord, he was a logistics genius. And the money? It poured in. By 2009, Forbes named him one of the richest men in the world. They estimated his wealth at over $1 billion. He ranked above the presidents of entire nations. But money wasn't his only weapon. Corruption was his currency. He didn't just bribe local police. He bought mayors, governors, federal agents. When that didn't work, he used fear. Enemies vanished. Informants were silenced. And if a rival stepped out of line, they were met with bodies, bullets, and public messages carved in blood. But El Chapo was more than a tyrant. He was a symbol. In poor villages, he paid for weddings, funerals, hospitals. He gave jobs, food, shelter. People saw him as a patron, a protector. Songs were written about him. Murals were painted in his honor. And for over a decade, Mexico's most wanted man was also its most protected. The DEA chased him. The CIA tracked him. Mexican Marines raided homes, chased rumors, surveilled relatives. And every time, El Chapo vanished like smoke. But the higher you climb, the more visible you become. And in 2014, after 13 years on the run, they finally caught him. It wasn't a shootout. It wasn't dramatic. He was found hiding in a beachfront condo in Mazatlan, with a young wife, an assault rifle at his side, and a tunnel hidden beneath the bathtub. Just in case. But this time, he didn't run. They caught him alive. The world watched as the king of narcos was led away in handcuffs. But deep down, many wondered, was this really the end? Or was it just another setup for escape? El Chapo was locked up again, this time in Altiplano, Mexico's highest security prison. Cameras, sensors, guards trained to resist bribes. They called it the Alcatraz of the desert. But El Chapo wasn't panicking. He was planning. From the moment the steel doors slammed shut, his people got to work, not outside the walls, beneath them. Somewhere in the countryside, a team of engineers, diggers, and cartel mechanics began tunneling. They used GPS coordinates to map the exact position of his cell. They worked silently, day and night, for months. They built a tunnel nearly a mile long, lined with PVC piping for air, electric lights, and a rail system. On that rail, a custom-built motorcycle on tracks, designed to race through the tunnel and carry one passenger. El Chapo, inside his cell, cameras watched him around the clock, except in one place, the shower, for privacy. On July 11, 2015, he stepped into that shower and vanished. No gunfire, no warning, just silence and an empty stall. By the time guards unlocked the cell door, the hole in the floor was already sealed behind a wall of dust. He climbed onto the motorcycle, raced through the underground highway, and emerged in a half-built house sitting quietly in a cornfield. Above ground, chaos. Inside the prison, alarms rang. The government scrambled. The world watched in disbelief. He had done it again. Escaped the most secure prison in Mexico. Without a shot fired. Without a trace. For the Mexican government, it was a global humiliation. For the Sinaloa Cartel, it was a miracle. And for the DEA and US intelligence, it was personal. Now, the hunt was no longer just about justice. It was about proving he could bleed. And this time, they would stop at nothing. After his escape, El Chapo didn't go underground. He went bolder. He gave interviews, spoke with celebrities, flirted with Hollywood. One message was clear. He wasn't hiding. He was daring the world to come find him. And they accepted the challenge. The DEA tapped phones. The CIA followed wire transfers. Mexican Marines kicked in doors, traced calls, surveilled everyone in his circle. But Chapo knew how to vanish. He switched phones constantly, never slept in the same house twice. He was protected by his people and protected by fear. Then came the mistake. A meeting with actress Kate Del Castillo and actor Sean Penn. A secret interview for a possible biopic. Chapo's ego wanted legacy, but the meeting revealed something else. A location. The Marines moved fast. In the early hours of January 8, 2016, they raided a house in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. It wasn't subtle. Gunfire erupted. Explosions shook the walls. 5 of Chapo's men were killed. 1 Marine was wounded. El Chapo fled through a secret tunnel beneath the bathtub. But this time, the tunnel didn't lead to freedom. It led to a sewer. He popped up blocks away, soaked, running, desperate. He stole a car with his last bodyguard, but the net was already closing. Minutes later, Mexican federal police spotted him. They pulled him over. He offered them money. Lots of it. They said no. And just like that, the world's most wanted man was in custody again. No shootout, no tunnel, no plan left. He was flown to Mexico City under heavy guard. The myth: bleeding, cuffed, caught. And this time, there would be no third escape. Because this time, he wouldn't stay in Mexico. The US had been waiting, and they wanted El Chapo. For years, Mexico had refused to extradite Joaquín Guzmán. Too dangerous, they said. Too powerful. Too many secrets that could crumble corrupt institutions. But after 2 escapes, there were no more excuses. On January 19, 2017, just hours before Donald Trump's inauguration, El Chapo was flown to the United States under maximum security. Destination: New York City. Brooklyn. Federal court. A prison cell with no windows, no visitors, no contact. No tunnels. In Mexico, he had controlled everything. In America, he controlled nothing. The trial began in late 2018, and what unfolded was like a narcos script written in blood. The courtroom was fortress-like. Snipers, dogs, federal agents in every hallway. The jury's identity was kept secret. The charges? 26 counts. From drug trafficking to money laundering, weapons violations, and ordering assassinations. Witness after witness took the stand. Former hitmen, lieutenants, even Chapo's closest allies. Men who had once killed for him now flipped to save themselves. They told stories of private jets and murder lists, of cash stored in oil drums, of bodies dissolved in acid, of children orphaned by decisions made over dinner. They painted a picture of a man who wasn't just a trafficker. He was a warlord in a business suit. Then came the evidence: encrypted texts, ledgers, tunnels, weapons, video, audio, blood. For weeks, El Chapo sat silent, listening, smiling, smirking, but never speaking. On February 12, 2019, the jury delivered the verdict: guilty, on all counts. The judge called his crimes overwhelmingly evil. He was sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 years. No parole, no appeal, no escape. They sent him to ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America. The Alcatraz of the Rockies. 23 hours a day in a concrete box. One small slit for sunlight. No human contact. The man who once ruled the Western Hemisphere's drug trade was now invisible. Not in the mountains, not in the tunnels, but in a cell, forgotten. Or so they thought. Because in Mexico, the Sinaloa Cartel never died, and neither did his name. Joaquín Guzmán is now locked in a cell the size of a closet. No phone, no visitors, no voice in the outside world. But his legacy lives on, loud, violent, and unfinished. The Sinaloa Cartel didn't collapse when he was captured. It evolved. His sons, known as Los Chipitos, stepped in. They grew up surrounded by violence, wealth, and silence. Now they run parts of the cartel with the same cold precision their father taught them. The drug routes remain open, the money still flows, and the violence never stopped. New rivals rise, like the CJNG, more brutal, more ambitious. The drug war continues, the graves multiply, and in Sinaloa, Chapo's legend grows. To some, he's a monster who drowned Mexico in blood. To others, he's a myth, a poor boy who took on the world and won, if only for a while. They write corridos, songs that praise his escapes, his power, his name. His face still appears on t-shirts, murals, whispered stories in the hills. But here's the truth. Chapo didn't win. He left behind orphans and widows, cities in fear, a government exposed, and a legacy soaked in death. The war on drugs didn't end with him. It just moved on to the next name, the next tunnel, the next empire waiting to rise. But for a moment in time, there was one man at the top, short, silent, savage. And the world knew him by one name, El Chapo.